my name is Danny and welcome to another Skyrim Miniatures painting video. I wanted to make a really easy beginner's tutorial on how to paint Imperial Light Infantry Soldiers from Skyrim. You can find a link to get these miniatures yourself below in the description. Use ESO5 for 5% off. But first, comment below, Stormcloaks or Imperials? Anyway, we're going to be achieving this quality using only 9 paints and 8 steps, with some very easy painting techniques perfect for beginners to follow along to get this quality of tabletop miniature. If you want more beginner-friendly videos on how to paint miniatures, make sure you subscribe with the bell icon so you can easily find my channel again. And drop a like to help push this video out there to others. Step 1. Undercoat the miniature with Xandri Dust from Citadel. You can use a spray can or a brush. I personally prefer using a spray can though, since it's faster and it gives a very even coverage. Step 2. We are going to be using Skeleton Horde Contrast Paint from Citadel. What is a contrast paint, I hear you ask? Well, it's really just watered down paint that can be applied to the miniature straight out of the pot, almost like a wash but more concentrated. Make sure you give it a shake before you actually use it. Then put some on your brush, but don't completely drench the miniature with it. Apply it liberally. And we pretty much want to apply Skeleton Horde all over the leather parts of the miniature. Since the paint is translucent, the base coat we applied will shine through, giving us these natural highlights with literally minimal effort from us. While the darker brown of the Skeleton Horde will sink into the recesses of the miniature, creating these lovely shadows. Now, I recommend trying to avoid the skin specifically while you're doing this, but aside from that, you don't need to worry about being too messy. You're literally just covering the miniature in this contrast paint. Now, because this paint is very watery, it will begin to pool at the bottom of the miniature thanks to gravity. So take the time to spread the paint back up over the miniature, otherwise you'll end up with really uneven dark spots towards the bottom once it dries. Once you finish the first leather section, this is what your miniature will look like. But again, make sure you dry your brush and go back over it, removing any areas of pooling paint, like at the bottom of this shield. Step 3. We want to add some snakebite leather contrast paint from Citadel. This is basically just a darker leather shade that we can use to create shadows. Since obviously leather clothing wears over time, adding this darker shade of brown is going to give an additional appearance of wear and tear to the leather clothing, which obviously makes it look more realistic. But once again, give it a shake before you use it. Now, assuming the light comes from above, we can assume the miniature's back will be in shadow. Also, if you refer to the Imperial Light Armored Soldiers in Skyrim, they actually have a darker tanned leather armor. I'm also going to paint the shoulder guards and leather skirt and the helmet with snakebite leather. I'm leaving the fur areas on the boot unpainted, and I'm also applying snakebite leather sparingly in places where light's going to be shining on it from above. Feel free to water down the paint further to achieve lighter shades with it. We're also going to be painting the inside of the shield since it's in a dark shadow. Again, don't worry too much about being super neat at this point. And to finish, I'm going to paint the front of the shield just to make it stand out as wood and not leather. Step 4. We're going to use Contrast Flesh Tearers Red. Since the Imperial Legion in Skyrim bears red clothing, however, most of their red clothing is actually hardly visible when they're fully armored in leather. I remember from the game that they had red shirts, even though I have thousands of hours invested into Skyrim, but they actually don't. They're just leather shirts. So we only need to paint the undergarbs red. The specific parts that we need to paint red are the cloaks that come from beneath the leather skirt. This is the part where you should take more time to avoid mistakes. After you've done that, come back around to the front and do the same thing. You also need to paint the shoulder shirt poking out from underneath the shoulder guards. Be careful once again here not to get any red on the skirt or leather that we already painted. And again, do the same with the other shoulder, and that's all the red we actually need to do on this miniature. Step 5. We will be painting metallic areas with Iron Breaker from Citadel. This is a metallic paint, so you need to give it a solid shake for at least 30 seconds until it reaches this metallic silver consistency. Because if left on the shelf, the pigments will actually naturally separate from one another. So you essentially need to shake it and mix them all up again. So now we need to paint all the metal areas. The most obvious ones are the sword, and again, don't worry that this is a really bright, vivid silver color. We'll be toning it down again later, so it needs to be brighter to start off with. And don't forget to paint the pommel. Next we have the iron banding on the wooden shield. Do try and take your time here, because if you accidentally get any metal paint on the wood, it is a bit more tricky to get rid of. I usually brace my elbows on the table so I can accurately draw my brush along the edge of the metal. Next we'll be painting his chainmail upper bodyguard. Now, just for the sake of accuracy, I will say that the shoulder chainmail in the game is actually just leather. But I think this is actually a mistake, because if you look at the original concept art based on real-life Roman Empire armor, you can see it was intended to be chainmail. But historically, you would have a chainmail sort of shoulder protection, and that's what I'm going to be painting on the model here. And also the arm guards and the leg guards. Note that in the game, the leg guards and arm guards are in fact leather, but I prefer them to be metal, so I'm going to paint them that way. Then finally swap to a smaller detailed brush to paint the small diamonds on the leather skirt as well. In game, these are not actually metal, but if you look at historic armor, they actually should be. You can also paint the belt buckles on the shoes, chest, and belt as well as these. Next we have step 6. We can finish off the metallic areas with Citadel Shade Nuln Oil. I'm using the gloss version to keep the shininess of the armor. Give it a shake before using it, and then apply it liberally to the metallic areas. Like, as you can see, the sword is going to have its shininess dulled down, making it look much more realistic, like it's actually being used and isn't made out of pure silver. The black wash will sink into the recesses of the blade naturally, highlighting the detail for you with pretty much no effort or skill required on your part. However, we will also wash the armor guards and the chainmail shoulder guards as well, and let it sink into the detail of the chainmail texture. Then again, we are going to go over the metal diamonds and the shield. You don't want to cover the wood areas at all though, only the metal. Then you can distinguish between the metal and wood areas easily. You can, however, wash the entire back of the shield as well, so it looks like it has been cast into a dark shadow. After the wash is dry, you can go back with another layer to make sure the metal's even darker, but again, that's up to you. Next we have step 7, the skin. You can use almost any skin colour, but I'm using Ungor Flesh from Citadel. Be sure to water it down a little before you apply it to this Imperial's arms, hands, face and legs, which are barely visible really, so you need to be careful at this point. This is really the most detailed step we'll be doing. Next though, we have step 8, where we're going to be using Agrax Earthshade to tone down the bright skin colour, because it's a bit glaring at the moment. This is another wash that you can apply to the skin we just painted, and once again it will sink into the recesses of the muscles and knuckles. It just makes the skin look more realistic and defined. So just go back over the exposed skin you just painted. And of course the face as well. Again though, don't let the wash pool in the face, otherwise you'll lose all the detail. Instead you just want a light glaze over it. Next we have a optional step, number 8. To go back over the skin again with Ungor Flesh to highlight the raised areas of muscle on the fingers and the knuckles. This really just defines certain parts of the miniature and makes it stand out as being more 3D. If you like, you can also go over some of the leather parts as well, like the bootstraps or the belt, with Dryad Bark, which is a light brown paint from Citadel. This step really isn't necessary though, and it just kind of takes your miniature that much further to the next level, so you can highlight around the edges of the armor and also those details that are slightly raised up above the rest of the leather, just to make them a little bit more defined, or maybe they're made out of a different type of leather. And now you're done, but as you can see we still need to finish the base. Otherwise, this will be a very lost Imperial soldier roaming the Alkir desert and not in Skyrim, fighting for the Broken Empire. So I'll leave a link in the description on my other guide for basing your miniatures. But before you go, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like and comment below any suggestions of any other miniatures you want to see painted. Even from Warhammer 40,000 or Age of Sigmar. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you for watching.